We're on page 71, but before that, let's read the Kitzur at the bottom of page 69. This was the fourth prerequisite, the fourth condition that the Rebbe shared, the Frierdiker Rebbe, the author of the Kuntris Klolei HaChinuch v'Hadracha, in which a person needs to look at in order to succeed in hashpah, in educating a student, a child, etc. So he says in the Kitzur, HaMechanech v'Hamadrich, the educator and the guide, tzorech lahasim es hano v'hamaguna. He needs to customize that is, vulgar, and that is beautiful, and that is vulgar, based on each student. You cannot just say that it's all for the same person. It's not that way. And he explained that before. I don't want to repeat it again. Let's go on. So now on top of 71, into the new chapter, today is 14, Yudalit. Tanai Chamishi, the fifth condition. Remember, these are all conditions in what he called way back, I think in chapter 8 or 7, the matzav. Right? There's the mahus, the essence of the student, and there's the matzav, the situation. And these are all conditions for the matzav. Tanai Chamishi, the fifth condition, Hizbonenus musuna, a deliberate reflection shel hamadrich v'hamechanech, of the educator, b'bchira seifane v'darchei HaChinuch v'Hadracha, in choosing specific approaches of education and guidance. So now he talks about the various approaches. Let's see what he says. HaMechanech v'hamadrich tzorech listakel heitev b'mayloisav v'chesreinoisav shel hamechunech v'hamudrich. The educator and the guide must gaze well, look well in the virtues and in the deficiencies of the student and the guide and the guided, the student and the guided. And he needs to reflect on these things with great amount of patience. So basically, if you don't have patience, you shouldn't be doing this. This shouldn't be your job. Okay. Laharich. What does he have to do when he does this? Laharich. To evaluate, uvelishkel, kolmailan, to weigh each virtue, v'chol chesarin, and each deficiency, bapeles umaznayim, through a weight. Shalei lahamid v'lei lisgadil, not to underestimate, v'lei lahagdil, and not to overestimate. So he really has to weigh carefully the student's virtues and deficiencies. Don't exaggerate and don't underestimate. Ukedugmas histaklos, and this is comparable to looking carefully v'hisboinenus and reflecting of ha'uman, a craftsman, haboidek uveichein, who searches ezekli l'sakna. He looks at a certain vessel that needs fixing. And the Rebbe is going to give an example now of a craftsman and a keli. And he says, Ha'umin kushutzarech l'sakin kli hine, when the craftsman corrects a keli, l'chol l'roish, the first and foremost, hu mefarik es hakli leivorev, he separates, he needs to take apart the limbs, the parts of the vessel, of the item, bezehirus, carefully, shalei l'shaber, not to break gam esoev eva, not to break that part, hamakulkul shebehakli, that's ruined in the vessel. So you're taking, let's say, a watch, and you have a watch that stops working. So you need to take it apart. You have to be careful not to break, in the process of taking it apart, that part of the watch that doesn't work well. Number 2, and after you took apart the item to its parts, then you need to reflect on each of the parts. Behara k'may batoiv. Not only in the good part of the watch, but also in those bad parts. You have to look at every single individual part that's left, that's there. Number 3, umechalkam, and when you study carefully the parts, you divide them lemaroches, to categories. Toiv, good. Beinoni, medium, mediocre, whatever. Vera, and bad. Fios, and then you once again reflect al kol echad min hachalokim. You've now categorized the parts. Then you restudy the parts as they are in the separate categories. You reflect on each of the parts. Im hachaluka haklolis lishleisha chalokim kailulim, by dividing them into 3 general categories: toiv, beinoni, v'ra, good, medium, and bad. Hi chaluka toiva. This is considered a good division. So in other words, first you have to determine which parts of the vessel are good, which are medium, and which are bad. And only once after you have made that determination, and hence you've put each of the items based on your calculation and assessment of the part in its category, do you continue. What do you continue with? And then you decide on what type of tikkun, correction, do I use for each of the parts. How do I remove that which is ruined? And what do I fill its place with? In other words, I'm going to take it away. I'm going to remove it, Yaakov. Why? Because it's no good. But there's a hole. There's a gap. There's something missing. So you have to already be thinking, what am I going to replace it with? Next. So 1 second. So this is the tikkun, right? This is the correction that is for what is already ruined, what we called before the category of bad, of ra. With what am I going to replace the bad issue? Next. Yes, Yaakov.
I think one thing that I'm having trouble with is that I'm hearing a lot of absolutes when the Rebbe is saying we divide between what is good and what's vulgar, and then these halakim of toys, beinoni, v'ra. Ra is also subjective, because sometimes those midos are exactly why we call them midos, is because there's a shakel between them. That sometimes they are to be good, used for good things, and sometimes these bad midos are meant to be used for a good purpose.
Let's say. So, yeah, go ahead.
So there's a lot of gray here. That also what we tell the students. We don't tell them that he's bad. We always give him encouragement. Now, that doesn't mean we rosy it. We don't rosy it, but anything that any good teacher that I've had always is can say a mensch.
Yeah, but you're not following. I think what he's saying. He's not saying to tell this to the student. He's talking here to the mashpia. Before he's talking about the assessment process, and if he sees anger in a student, is that in a particular way, is it good or bad? It's bad. It's bad for that student at that time in that manner. It's no good, so the mashpia has to now hone in on that aspect and not confuse another aspect of his personality. On the contrary, I think what the Rebbe is saying supports what you're saying. To say, he's a bad student because he has one area, one part of the keli, one part of the watch is broken. If a watch has one part that's no good, does it make the other parts no good? No. That's what he's saying. There are parts that are toiv, there are parts that are beinani, and there are parts that are ra, and a good educator needs to himself come to that determination before he's mashpia. We're not talking yet about the hashpah. We're talking all about in the mashpia. Okay? So now, so that was the first thing. Number two, he says, he's now talking about the oifane hatikun, the methods for correction. So now he says, Eich l'sakein es habeini lasas toiv. He already identified that there's part of this vessel that is, it can last a few more years, a little while longer. So it's not tov. It's not ra, it's mediocre. It has still some shelf life, a battery in a car. You go to mechanic, I've been told this, your battery has still some juice, but, don't expect it to go long term. And you say to him, and when will it burn out? When will I can't tell you, but, it's not a new battery, and I'm recharging it now, and it'll take the charge, but it's already symptomatic of being a shvacha battery. That's beinani. So he says the beinani, we have to somehow turn this beinani and give it a upgrade to make it to tov, to make it good. And that's an avodah. Do you replace the battery? Do you somehow, is it possible to give the battery more, something new, and with that, the battery will have a strong life. You know what I'm saying? So what?
On the other hand, let's say you're dealing with a kid with, some syndrome, and the way he is the way he is. So trying to upgrade the battery is going to be square pegs and round holes.
Right. You're right. So again, there, a good mechanuch, the Rebbe is not saying here that every child in every situation has these three things. He's just saying that there are times when a student has these in a situation like you mentioned, so you're right. That doesn't apply. It doesn't apply. If the Eibishter didn't bless someone with that particular blessing, but he blessed them with other ones, if you identify that, your job will be easier because you won't have expectations of him in that area. Okay? So the Rebbe is not contradicting that. He's not contradicting that. But we're talking, Yaakov, about someone who doesn't, in this case, doesn't have that issue. Okay? He doesn't have, he wasn't blessed by Hashem with these issues in his life. Okay? He was blessed in a different way. And seemingly everything is rosy and everything is good, but then you look and you see there's some bad midos and you see some that are in the middle. How do you deal with that? Let's go on. Then he says, "V'yizboinem b'seder atikin." I'm sorry. Eich l'chazek es hatoiv. That's already referring to the third category. Someone, when you identify that part of the character that is toiv, that is good, how do you continue to maintain that it be toiv and it doesn't fall? We live in a very challenging world. And there are people that are raised in wonderful homes, and they're raised with wonderful parents and community, and they have midas and all that. And they go out, whether it be to university, whether it be to yeshiva, whether it be to work, whatever the case. And they meet all kinds of people, and they see all kinds of situations, and they start slipping, and they start, and I don't mean now just Jewishly. Their character becomes dull. Their character becomes, there's a word in Yiddish, farjavet, rusty, and they start becoming more bohemian because they're living amongst bohemians, and they, tend to gravitate towards that at times. So the Rebbe says the third category of the midah taiva, that right, or let's talk about in the vessel, in the watch. There's a part of the watch, you open it up, wow! It's like it was never touched. It's like new. Now, how do you know it's going to be that way next year? You're lucky that till now it's that way. So that's why the Rebbe says, Eich lechazek es hatoiv. The mashpia has to devise a plan in himself. How will I get this student to continue being toiv? And that's an accomplishment. Okay? And we've seen this too. We've seen this many, many times. I saw it when I was, I do sometimes shidduchim. In the past I did more. So I had women coming, looking for shidduchim. So, some of them I heard were in school as an 18, 19-year-old, Hasidic girls. They would never, let's say, listen to non-Jewish music. Now they're 23, 24, 25. They're in the workforce. And many times non-Jewish music plays there. And sounds pretty nice. And they start getting a liking for it. So when they drive home, they put on the music. So they're good. But an issue, there's been a drop. Why? Because of a circumstance. And of course, ultimately, they're unhappy that their friends are married and they're not. And it really bothers them. So they start chilling out. They told me this. I'm telling you from case history, not my own thoughts, what they told me. What's the nekuda? The nekuda is you have to devise a plan, Yonason, how to keep a midah taiva to continue to being good. So what we've identified here this morning so far is there's the taiv, the beinani, and the ra in every person's character, and a good mashpia assesses those three things, and he thinks about what they need of tikkun. In other words, everyone needs tikkun. That's the vart, Yaakov. Everyone, and let's even talk about the example you gave. Someone who's blessed from Hashem to be born a certain way with a deficient, with an impediment. Okay, so what? So you need to guide that person too. And that's why we have the whole field of special education. It's not just it's a field. It's a study. How do you improve the quality of life of a special needs person, child, and environment? It's a whole culture, and a very important culture. Yes, Yaakov.
Forgive me, I have to comment on what you mentioned about the music. It just rubbed me the wrong way. That I was in the office, I had to go for a procedure, and the music they played, it was just awful. And I couldn't wait to get to put my own headphones on to play what I enjoy listening to, nice, now still a cappella Nigunim, and I couldn't wait. It irked me so much to hear how pressed the lyrics are and the music and the style of it. It's a person in search that has an answer and that wants to have a question. They already have the answer. It's because they're broken. And a person who doesn't want that, if they realize their goal is to be Yiddish Amana, they won't let that infiltrate them. They won't let that affect them. That's a person who we all we're sensitive to everybody's Metzavin. I'm just saying that's a person who already has an answer that wants to have a question. They already have their answer because I'm Sabrachim because of my friends.
Right, but
if you don't want to be that way, you won't be that way. You won't let it get to you because I'm telling you.
Okay, but Yaakov, not everyone's like you. Not everyone's like you. I mean,
that's not the goal.
I know you're responding with much emotion, and I appreciate it. But I got to sit back and tell you that, and I'm that way too. But I got to sit back as a counselor, as a shadchan. I got to hear where they're coming from, and to impose and say it's disgusting and it's an avera and it's repugnant and how you're a lowlife. I mean, you're not going to get anywhere.
No, we're not calling anybody names. I'm just saying that the goals to which you aspire to, this isn't going to help you get there. If you want the nice shidduch that you're looking for, this isn't going to help you get there because you're already answering a question that shouldn't have an answer, because if you know what you're looking for, this can't be part of the answer.
Right. No, that's true. That's true, and that's part of what we discuss. But what I'm saying is, I was bringing out that they start, that there's a fall. In other words, someone who's toiv, someone who had good toiv in them, and there's a decline in the toiv. Whether it makes sense or doesn't make sense. Anyway, let's continue. And he says, the craftsman who has to fix this broken vessel because of a broken part needs to reflect on what should be the order of tikkun avi. Very important. It doesn't say more here, but it's very important. If you begin with C instead of A, it's a mistake. If you put too much in A and nothing in C, it's A, B, and C, Tov, Beinani, and Ra, and you leave nothing over for C, for Tov, it's also no good. In other words, there's an order. Look at his words. Seder hatikun. And the mashpia has to be mizboinen, has to reflect on the order of the corrective method. What should I deal with first in the student? And once he does that, this vessel is now fixed. He corrects this, he fixes this vessel in the most beautiful way. And that's why? Because A, he's assessed them correctly. B, he's focused on what each part needs. And C, he has a method and a style of what's first and what's second and what's third as far as his correction to the problem. This was all the moshel, says the Rebbe now. This is the last paragraph on page 71. It is superfluous to explain all the details of the moshel, of the craftsman who is diligent in fixing the vessel, benimshul, in the moral of the mechanech v'hamadrich, of the educator, hashoichet b'chinuch v'hadracha, that's immersed in education. Why is it unnecessary to explain? The Rebbe writes, it is impossible to explain all details as they are. Ki'im b'shirtutim kolim, only in general marks. In other words, general points. Every situation is different. I mean, Yaakov alluded to that earlier. So to give you specific advice for every specific issue is impossible. V'ten l'chacham, it's a quote, give the wise something, the generality, v'yechkam od. I want you to remember that, Chevra, this quote. Ten l'chacham v'yechkam od. It's used in Jewish literature and learning. Give the wise a bissel, a little, v'yechkam od. And he will then take that and be smarter by using it further in his own life. So the Rebbe is saying here, what?
It's a Pasuk Mishlei.
Pasuk in Mishlei, thank you. So, right, of course, Pasuk in Mishlei. So the Rebbe is saying that take the information that I've given you in a general way and use your seichel and apply it accordingly. Lifchoi, to do what? To choose oifane v'darchei chinuch v'adracha, to choose specific approaches in educating. Asher l'chol reish, to begin with, tzarech liyes masun, you must be masun, patient, calm, and patient, v'savlon, v'losem daite v'libi al kol prat, to pay attention to every detail, gama yosekotten, the minutest of details, b'yachas, as it's in association, el ha-mechunech v'amudruch, to the student, v'chinuchai, and his education, v'adachos, and his guidance, b'moyatz, his chochma, with education, with smart. So in other words, basically in this paragraph, and we're now going on to page 73, the Rebbe is saying that I can't spill it out for you in detail. It's just too much. I'm giving you the general guidelines of how, and I gave you a mushal. I gave you Yonason, a beautiful mushal of a craftsman. Relearn that, rethink it, and then take the same ideas and apply it to education. Top of 73. The relationship of the educator to the educated has to be strong, firm, unwavering. If an educator shows flippy-floppiness, he will be a flip-flop. Okay? You want to succeed, you have to show that you're chazak. You believe in what you're saying, you know what you're saying, and you're not changing your mind. You're the educator. And this will have an impact on the student, that the student will know for sure, he'll walk away. That since the educator designed and gave a certain instructions for education to the student, regardless in belimud, whether it be in study, in banhaga, or in practice, my teacher, my educator is not changing his mind. He's not going to be swayed by honor and money and all kinds of what we call chanifa. And nothing will prevent the educator from bringing the educated in bechesed, in beshevet, whether I need to be kind or kind of stern, by fulfilling his instruction. So basically, you cannot and you will not succeed if the educator is this type of educator, which the Rebbe says he needs to be such an educator. Chazak, what's the words? Takif, chazak, beli bederach, beli yeshuna, unwavering. And by the way, this does not equal being stubborn. We're talking about he's thought out intellectually and rationally an approach, and it makes sense for this student based on his assessment, as we've been talking about, and that's what he sticks to. Only this type of forceful education, with kind of pangs of iron, will place the student on a good plateau, good and right and straight and truthful. Quotes the pasuk. Even when he will be older, he won't deviate from it. Next paragraph. However, this right away. This that I told you that it needs to be firm and strong and unwavering, muchrachas. It must liyos b'mishpatzos ava v'nimus masuda. It must, however, be framed by love and thoughtfulness. That's what I told you. Thoughtfulness, but not only thoughtfulness. That the student knows, that my teacher, who's unwavering and not changing his opinion, he loves me. And because he loves me, he feels this is the best way for me. So it's not that he's doing this because he's a stubborn individual and a mean individual. No, he's a loving individual. You hear? In addition to the fact that love and etiquette, it benefits the reception of the instruction that the student takes from the educator. More so, here we go. 5 benefits. Get ready. Let's count. Aleph. This type of education will give the the student a harocha, a value. He values the teacher. He sees his unwavering. So he sees this guy, this man, this teacher, this educator, he really means it. And that's why he's not bowing to the right and the left and changing his mind. He's not wishy-washy. Number 2, the educator, the student sees, it's not due to cruelty, or ezekas, or anger, or kpeda, and sternness, that this is the way that the educator deals with him, with great firmness, and he's very on top of him. I'll call prat to prat in every detail. Whether it be in learning, whether it be in conduct, he feels this is coming because he loves me. That's why he cares so much about me. Number 3, Gimel. It's necessary that this type of conduct that he will use for the student, it will add Aleph. It will reciprocate the love from the student to the teacher. Trust. The student will trust the teacher, the educator. Gimel, mashmas, he will follow and listen. And he will follow the instructions of the teacher. Dalit, by seeing that his teacher is firm, it will evoke in him that the approach to life, a healthy approach, is to be firm and unwavering in a positive way, with love as its essence, as its core. And 5, hanhogazu, this conduct, it will teach the educated, the student, as yisoidei v'ikore hanimus v'derech eretz, the fundamental principles of decorum and proper behavior. And this is very, very important and very thoughtful of the Rebbe to delineate 5 different results, positive results, from a teacher who is firm and unwavering. And what we have to do is think about, over the years in school or university, if we had such a teacher, and did we pick up these 5 things or some of the 5 from that particular teacher? In other words, sometimes you have a teacher who, is wishy-washy. One boy says one thing, and one student says one thing, and the other day someone else says, one day's talking on the right side, one's talking on the left side. Who is he? He's not firm. And then you have a teacher, you have an educator who is firm. Why? The difference is because he's thoughtful, and he's not as thoughtful. And when you're thoughtful, and especially when you're coming from a place of love, not thoughtful because he's mean or cruel. The Rebbe says that here. If he has a preconceived meanness and cruelty and anger, he's not the right, because then it's not coming from love. Then it's coming from his own his own self-ego and his own issues. So yes, you listen.
Yeah, I remember very well when I was in the school for disabled children in South Africa before Bar Mitzvah.
Yeah.
And there were like 3 or 4 of us in the class.
Yeah.
And we had a teacher, her name was Mrs. Harrison, and she really, really believed in us, really, really pushed us, and really, really gave us self-confidence, self-esteem. And she said that we can all go to normal school. And she pushed us, and we all went to normal school.
Wow.
And it made such a big difference in my life. It was so amazing.
Right. because she got it. She was on the right track.
Absolutely. For the rest of my life, the one guy who's now in LA is professor of political science.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, my daughters tell me that, certain students in Beis Rivka in the school, who Hashem, didn't give them certain body parts or certain, and they're like the top student, and, and it's amazing. It's amazing. But you're right. You have to have an educator who believes in you. But believe in you doesn't mean, excuse the expression, sucking up to you, Believe you means that he tells you the truth. I told you, where I'm a shpia in Morristown, when I came to him and I spoke about certain midas, I didn't like it within myself, and I asked him for any advice. So he said, get yourself a bacher in the Beis Medrash who will give you musar. Right? Melech Tzibur. Yonason knows, our mashpia, Melech, that's what he told me. And what did he mean? He meant a friend that's really a friend, but a real friend opens up and tells you, hey, in this area, it's ugly. You got to make a change. You know what I'm saying? So the firmness and the unwavering strength is so important for the development. And at the time, sometimes you don't see it because you don't like it, I think about it in my years in yeshiva, sometimes I didn't like it. It's too bad. Too bad. Because the educator sees the whole picture. I remember, I'll end with this. I remember when we were in Los Angeles, we were already older students, shluchim. We were sent from Morristown, from the yeshiva to LA. And we had some tinus, we had some complaints about the Rosh Yeshiva. Okay? And I was chosen to be the representative. So I went into the Rebbe's secretary, Rebbe Chadakov. And Rebbe Chadakov was a very, very bright man. He was a pedagogue of education. He was the education minister in Riga, Latvia. You're talking about a very educated top person in the field of education. And of course, a frum person and everything else, a very frum person. He learned the Navardic, you know what I'm saying? So I brought my complaints to him. So he told me this. He told me, a mashal, he said, you have a war of soldiers protecting the front, and the enemy's on the other side. And you hear all of a sudden that there's a breach to the right. So you leave your post and you go there to stop it, right? You've lost the war because they come in from where you left. And he said, you only see, that soldier only saw one part of the entire picture. So he figures he has to go to that side to protect the breach on the other side, right? What he doesn't see is there's a greater whole picture. So he said to me, you students, he's talking about the 22-year-olds, 21, 22 years, you guys see one part of the picture. The Rosh Yeshiva sees the whole picture. And therefore we side with him, not with you. That's what he told us. Okay, Chevre, have a great day, everyone. We'll continue learning tomorrow. Sei gesund. Bye-bye.